would like to spend the next few videos in the series talking about the theistic view of God. That is, a belief that there is a God who is personal, rational, infinite, and powerful enough to create the universe. And I would like to begin by going through a few of the arguments that I think are fairly persuasive. The first one being the cosmological argument, that is, if the world has a beginning, then there must be somebody outside of the beginning that must have started it. I find that very compelling. Another one of the arguments that I find very persuasive is the teleological argument. That is, there seems to be an end goal in the development of natural laws to support the existence of life on this planet, and we will spend more time talking about that. Another argument that I think is compelling is the moral argument, and I hit on this briefly in the first video when I was talking about what I thought were the limitations of naturalism, and that is, if all we have is natural law, then our moral laws, our values, come completely down to our opinions of things. There is no higher authority by which we can judge our actions than ours, than man. And so I find that as a compelling argument, and the fact that there are moral inclinations throughout cultures and throughout history that point to a moral creator or a moral authority. I think that's pretty compelling as well. I do want to give a caveat in regards to the arguments here for the existence of a theistic personal God. And that is that in my own experience, it was experience, I believe, that led me to Christ. I believe that when I was 15, I had a very spiritual, emotional experience. And I think ultimately all of us end up coming to a belief about these things as a result of our faith or as a result of our experience. And so as much as I have looked at the arguments, the rational arguments for the existence of God, I need to make it clear that that wasn't really where I started in my spiritual journey as a Christian. And so let's take a look at, and actually it was after I met Christ, and I, of course, did not meet him in a corporate body. That is, he didn't have a corporate body. But nonetheless, I felt like I had a very, very clear spiritual experience. And so after that experience, and it was very emotional, I looked for reasons why it was the most rational explanation for my view of the world. And the first book I read after I met Christ was called Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. And I would recommend anything that C.S. Lewis has written. He's my favorite author. And he will tell you that that his own conversion to Christianity was a result of long walks with J.R.R. Tolkien or Owen Barfield at Oxford University, where they all taught together and worked together. But what he does in Surprised by Joy is talk about his specific conversion in terms of his feelings of joy that came to him as a result of reading George MacDonald's fantasies. And so his atheistic understanding of the world did not have a place for real joy. And it was probably he probably didn't want to experience a joy killer by trying to explain to himself that it was really just an accidental combination of neurons in his brain. And so it is very, very common for those of us who have been converted to a particular faith, and I can talk specifically about the Christian faith because I'm a Christian, to have been converted through an emotional/spiritual experience. And then afterwards start piecing together some of the rational foundations for the faith. And that's pretty well what I've been doing over the course of these years. One of the most compelling arguments for the existence of God is what is called the cosmological argument. And the idea behind that is, if there is a beginning to the universe, then there must have been a beginner. So Stephen Hawking writes in one of his books, late 20th, early 21st century, he says, almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang. In the past, the way the naturalist would try to skirt the idea of something coming from nothing would be to say that the universe was eternal, is eternal. And so we don't have to then explain how it came to be. But with the Big Bang, all of that pretty well changed. Scientists discovered that the universe is expanding and that it did have a beginning. And if it did have a beginning, how did that happen? How did something come from nothing? The argument, the cosmological argument, is that everything that has a beginning has a cause. That's the major premise. The minor premise is that the universe had a beginning. And the conclusion then must be that the universe has a cause. What Plato referred to as the uncaused cause. So, and philosophers have talked in terms of the first cause, the first movers. Islamic theology in the 11th century really laid this argument out in very clear terms. And it became a part of regular Christian understandings, probably with the writings of Bonaventure in 13th century. So Christian folks weren't the first folks to really start looking at this idea in philosophical terms. But it really is at the foundation, I think, of Islamic, Jewish, and Christian belief in an infinite, personal, rational, powerful God that created the universe. The idea is that the beginning of the universe must have been beyond space and time. If not, then space and time must have created space and time, which which is absurd. So that's the idea. It must be a God who is powerful enough and who exists out of a timeless, non-spatial, and immaterial existence. First cause must be without limits and it must be infinite. It must be unimaginably powerful to create the entire universe out of nothing. Must be supremely intelligent to design the universe in such incredible precision. And it must be personal in order to create the universe out of nothing. And what I mean by that specifically at this point is it must have had the ability to make decisions. It must have had the intellectual wherewithal of a person to decide that they were going to create out of nothing. A quote by Arno Penzias, who's a Nobel laureate in physics and the co-discoverer of the radiation afterglow in the Big Bang, in 2001 said that astronomy leads us to a unique event, which was created, a universe which was created out of nothing and delicately balanced to provide exactly the conditions required to support life. In the absence of an absurdly improbable accident, the observations of modern science seem to suggest an underlying, one might say, supernatural plan. And he's not the only scientist who, as a result of his own observations, have discovered what might be called the hidden hand of God. Hugh Ross, who was a astrophysicist, astronomer, writes in The Creator and the Cosmos that understanding that the universe had a beginning leads to an understanding of a creator of the universe. And then he fleshes that out. And you see a very similar thing with Francis Collins, who is the recently retired National Institute of Health director. He has a PhD and an MD. He's a scientist and a medical doctor. And he was the head of the team that mapped out the human genome in the early 21st century. And he wrote a book called The Language of God, where he talks about his own observations as a scientist and how that ends up leading him to a belief in not only a personal rational God, but a belief in a Christian God. And so those are a couple of resources that I would suggest. But all of that to say that the scientific evidence has led many scientists to hold to the truth of what is called for in the cosmological argument. In the next video, I'm going to spend some time talking about the teleological argument and the moral arguments for the existence of God. Thank you.